My dad always felt like a stranger, a man of quiet routines and unspoken thoughts. We had a polite relationship, the kind built on shared meals and careful conversations, but never on deep emotional dives. It was during the sorting of his affairs after his sudden death that the first crack appeared in the foundation of everything I thought I knew. A small, locked box in his study, a box I'd never seen before, held not just papers, but a secret that would unravel my entire life. The air in my dad's study always smelled faintly of old paper and pipe tobacco, a scent that had always been comforting. Now, it felt suffocating. He'd been gone 6 weeks, and the task of sifting through his meticulously organized life felt like a betrayal, a violation of his quiet privacy. My mom, bless her, had been too distraught to even enter the room. So, it fell to me, his only child, to be the executor of his estate, and his memories. I started with the desk, its mahogany surface gleaming under the weak afternoon sun filtering through the blinds. Everything was in its place, neat stacks of bills, correspondence, a worn leather-bound address book. Then, tucked away in the bottom drawer, beneath a pile of old tax returns, I found it. A small, dark wooden box, no bigger than a shoebox, with an ornate brass lock. It wasn't like him to have secrets, not that I knew of anyway. He was an open book, or so I'd always believed. My fingers traced the intricate carvings on the lid. Curiosity, a feeling I rarely indulged when it came to my father, gnawed at me. I rummaged through his desk drawers, searching for a key, anything. Nothing. The box felt heavy, substantial. I could hear my mom moving around downstairs, her footsteps heavy with grief. I knew I should be focused on the legal documents, the will, the immediate tasks. But this box, it pulsed with an unknown significance. It felt like a riddle he'd left behind, a final, silent message. I picked it up, the weight surprising me. It wasn't just the wood, there was something dense inside. I shook it gently. A faint rattle, a dry, papery sound. Was it old coins? A collection of something? Or something else entirely? The urge to pry it open, to break the lock and uncover its contents, was almost overwhelming. It felt wrong, disrespectful, but the pull was too strong. This was my father's secret, and now, by extension, it was becoming mine. I took the box with me, leaving the desk drawer ajar, a small disruption in the perfect order he'd maintained. Downstairs, the silence was punctuated only by the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall, each tick a reminder of the time that had passed, and the time I had left to understand the man I thought I knew. I sat in the living room, the box on my lap, the late afternoon light casting long shadows across the carpet. The wood was cool beneath my fingertips. I ran my thumb over the lock again. What was he hiding? And why from me? The questions circled, unanswered, as the sun dipped lower, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, a final, dramatic flourish to a day that had already felt too heavy. My mom eventually joined me in the living room, her eyes red-rimmed, a fresh cup of tea clutched in her trembling hands. I'd placed the box on the coffee table between us, a silent question mark hanging in the air. She looked at it, her brow furrowed. "What's that, dear?" she asked, her voice raspy. I explained how I'd found it, the locked state, my inability to find a key. She shook her head slowly. Arthur never mentioned any special box. Arthur. My father. Always Arthur, even after 30 years of marriage. It was a formality, a distance she maintained, a distance I'd never really questioned. Now, it felt like another clue, another piece of a puzzle I was only beginning to assemble. We sat in silence for a while, the unspoken weight of the box pressing down on us. I remembered my dad's small workshop in the garage, his haven of tools and projects. He was a tinkerer, always fixing things, always taking them apart. Maybe he'd kept the key there. It was a long shot. I got up and headed to the garage, the scent of oil and sawdust a familiar contrast to the stuffiness of the house. The garage was as organized as his study, tools hung on pegboards, projects neatly stacked. I searched his workbench, his tool chest, even the pockets of his old work apron. Nothing. Dejected, I was about to give up when my eyes landed on a small, metal tin on a high shelf, the kind that used to hold biscuits. It looked out of place, dusty, and clearly hadn't been opened in years. On a whim, I pulled it down. Inside, nestled amongst dried-up paintbrushes and some old screws, was a single, small, brass key. It looked, familiar. My heart began to pound. I rushed back inside, my mom watching me with a mixture of hope and apprehension. I held the key up. It was the right size, the right color. With trembling hands, I inserted it into the lock of the wooden box. It turned with a soft click. The lid creaked open. The contents of the box weren't what I expected. No jewelry, no old love letters, no hidden stash of cash. It was, primarily, legal documents. A stack of papers, tied with a faded ribbon. The top document, however, made my breath catch in my throat. It was a birth certificate. But it wasn't mine. Or rather, it was a birth certificate with a name I didn't recognize, Michael Jonathan Davies. The date of birth was the same as mine. The parents' names, however, were completely unfamiliar. My mother's name, my father's name, they were nowhere to be seen. Instead, listed as parents were Sarah Jane Davies and Thomas Edward Davies. My mind reeled. Was this a mistake? Some sort of clerical error? I rifled through the other documents, my hands shaking. There was a marriage certificate for Sarah and Thomas Davies, dated a year before this Michael's birth. There was also a letter, addressed to my father, Arthur, from a law firm, dated just a few months after Michael's birth. It spoke of an agreement, an adoption, and a transfer of parental rights. My father's name was on it, as the recipient. But it was my name, the one I'd carried my entire life, that was listed as the child being adopted. Michael Jonathan Davies. That was me. The man in the box, the man whose birth certificate lay before me, was me. The realization hit me like a physical blow, knocking the air from my lungs. I wasn't Arthur and Mary's son. I was adopted. And my father, the quiet, reserved man I'd always known, had kept this monumental secret from me my entire life. The room seemed to tilt. I looked at my mother, her face pale, her eyes wide with a dawning horror. Had she known? Did she know all along? The questions I'd had about my father's quiet nature, his occasional distant silences, suddenly coalesced into a terrifying new reality. He wasn't just a man of few words, he was a man guarding a secret that defined my very existence. I stumbled back into the living room, the birth certificate clutched in my hand like a fragile, dangerous artifact. My mother was still sitting on the sofa, her tea long forgotten, her gaze fixed on the wooden box. The silence between us was thick with unspoken questions, with a shared, horrifying discovery. I couldn't hold it in. "Mom," I choked out, my voice raw. "What is this? Who are Sarah and Thomas Davies?" Her eyes met mine, and in them, I saw a flicker of something I'd never seen before, fear. Not just grief, but a deep, abiding fear. She looked away, her gaze drifting towards the window. "Arthur, he wanted to protect you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Protect me from what?" I demanded, the words sharp, laced with a sudden, unexpected anger. "From the truth. From who I actually am." She finally looked back at me, tears streaming down her face. He thought it would be easier. That you would never need to know. Never need to know. The absurdity of it, the sheer, devastating betrayal, washed over me. My entire identity, the very bedrock of my life, was built on a lie. Easier for whom, Mom? I pressed, my voice rising. Easier for him. Easier for you. Because it certainly wasn't easy for me to find this out buried in a box after you died. The accusation hung in the air, heavy and ugly. She flinched, her hands flying to her mouth. "Oh, darling, no. We loved you. Arthur loved you more than anything." Love. How could she say love when my entire life had been a carefully constructed illusion? I stood there, the birth certificate trembling in my hand, my mind a whirlwind of confusion and pain. I needed answers, real answers, not just platitudes about love. I needed to understand why my father, a man I'd always respected, had subjected me to this profound deception. The quiet man, the man of routines, had a secret life, a secret identity for his only son. And I felt utterly alone, adrift in a sea of his making. I looked at my mother, her face a mask of sorrow, and realized that even she, my mother, had been a part of this secret. The family I thought I had was a carefully curated performance, and I had been the unwitting lead actor. The days that followed were a blur of disjointed conversations with my mother and increasingly frantic searches online. My father's name, Arthur Peterson, yielded nothing unusual. My mother's, Mary Peterson, the same. The names on the birth certificate, Sarah and Thomas Davies, however, were a different story. A quick search brought up a wedding announcement from a local paper, dated 2 years before my birth. Sarah Jane Miller and Thomas Edward Davies. The dates matched. They were married. My father's name, Arthur, wasn't mentioned anywhere. But the law firm's letter was dated just months after my birth. It spoke of an adoption agreement. This meant my biological parents, Sarah and Thomas, had given me up. And my adoptive parents, Arthur and Mary, had taken me in. But the agreement, what did that mean? Why the secrecy? I needed to speak to someone who might know more. The law firm named in the letter was still in operation, though the partners mentioned were long deceased. I called their main number, my heart pounding with each ring. I explained, as calmly as I could, that I was looking for information regarding an adoption agreement finalized around my birth year, involving a child named Michael Jonathan Davies, and a couple named Arthur and Mary Peterson. The receptionist was polite but unhelpful, citing privacy laws and the age of the records. "We can't just give out information like that, sir," she said, her tone professional but firm. Frustrated, I hung up. I tried searching for Sarah and Thomas Davies online. I found a social media profile for a Sarah Davies, but it was active only until about 5 years ago. The profile picture was of an older woman, smiling, with kind eyes. Could that be her? My biological mother? The thought sent a shiver down my spine. There were no pictures of a Thomas Davies. The profile was sparse, mostly shared articles about gardening and local news. No personal details, no recent posts. It was like looking into a locked room. I also found an obituary for a Thomas Edward Davies, who had passed away 10 years prior. It mentioned his wife, Sarah, and a surviving daughter, but again, no mention of adoption or any other children. It felt like hitting a wall at every turn. The more I looked, the less I seemed to find. The secrecy surrounding my adoption felt even more entrenched now, a deliberate effort to bury the past. I felt a desperate need to connect with my biological roots, but the path was shrouded in shadow. The online search for Sarah Davies had yielded frustratingly little, but the image of that woman's kind eyes haunted me. Was she my mother? The woman who carried me, who made the agonizing decision to give me away. I kept returning to her social media profile, studying every shared article, every bland comment, searching for a hint of recognition, a whisper of connection. Nothing. The profile was a digital ghost, present but offering no substance. I found myself wondering about the daughter mentioned in Thomas Davies' obituary. Was she my sister? Did she know about me? The thought was dizzying. I eventually decided to try a different approach. I contacted the county records office, hoping to find more detailed adoption records, or perhaps a more direct link to my biological parents. It was a long shot, navigating bureaucratic red tape and privacy restrictions, but I was driven by a need to understand. After several weeks of waiting and filling out more forms than I cared to count, I received a sealed envelope. Inside were copies of the original adoption papers. The agreement letter from the law firm was indeed part of the documentation, confirming Arthur and Mary Peterson had formally adopted me. But there was also a separate affidavit, signed by Sarah Jane Davies, stating her consent to the adoption and expressing her wishes for the child's future well-being. It was a brief, formal document, devoid of emotion, yet I read it over and over, searching for some clue to her state of mind. Then, tucked within the packet, I found something else, a handwritten note, on a small piece of stationery, clearly not part of the official legal documents. It was addressed to Arthur. The handwriting was different from the official documents, a more flowing, personal script. It read, "Arthur, I trust you will provide him with a good life. I cannot. Please, do not let him forget me entirely. Sarah." My hands trembled as I held the note. Do not let him forget me entirely. The plea, so raw and full of unspoken pain, pierced through the years of silence. She wasn't a stranger anymore. She was a woman who had loved me, who had grieved for me, and who had desperately hoped I would know her. The secrecy, I realized, wasn't just about my adoptive parents, it was about protecting Sarah, too, perhaps from her own grief or the judgment of others. This note changed everything. It transformed my quest from uncovering a family secret to understanding a mother's sacrifice. The handwritten note from Sarah was a turning point. It shifted the focus of my anger and confusion from my adoptive parents to the complex circumstances of my birth. My father, Arthur, had carried this secret for over 30 years. Why? The note from Sarah, "Please, do not let him forget me entirely," implied a level of communication, perhaps even a difficult relationship, between him and my biological mother. Had they been involved in some way before I was born? Was there a reason he felt he had to hide my origins so completely, not just from me, but seemingly from my mother, Mary, too? I confronted Mary again, gently this time, about the note. She admitted she hadn't known about it, or about Sarah. She said Arthur had always been a private man, and after they adopted me, he'd seemed determined to create a new family narrative, one where my adoption was simply a closed chapter, a solved problem. She confessed that she'd often felt a distance from him, a sense that he held things back, but she'd attributed it to his reserved personality. Now, she understood. The weight of the secret had been immense, and it had clearly impacted their relationship in ways she hadn't fully grasped. I decided I had to try and reach out to Sarah. The social media profile was still there, a digital echo of a woman I desperately wanted to know. I composed a message, my fingers hovering over the send button for a long time. I started with the basics: "Dear Ms. Davies, my name is Michael. I believe we may be related. I recently discovered some information about my birth, and I found your social media profile." I explained that my adoptive father, Arthur Peterson, had kept my adoption a secret, and that I had found a note from her. I tried to convey the raw emotion of Sarah's plea, the pain of a mother's longing. I ended by saying I understood if she didn't want to respond, but that I felt compelled to reach out. Sending that message felt like stepping off a cliff. I had no idea what I would receive, or if I would receive anything at all. The silence that followed was deafening, amplifying the anxiety that had been building within me for weeks. I replayed the note in my head, "Do not let him forget me entirely." It was a plea for remembrance, and I felt an overwhelming obligation to honor it, to give Sarah the connection she had so clearly desired. The wait for Sarah's response was agonizing. Every notification on my phone sent a jolt of adrenaline through me, only to be followed by disappointment. Days turned into a week. I tried to distract myself, to immerse myself in work, but my thoughts kept returning to the unanswered message, to the possibility of a connection, or the finality of silence. Then, one evening, as I was about to give up hope, I saw it. A new message notification from Sarah Davies. My heart leaped into my throat. I opened it with trembling fingers. It was a reply. Short, but it was there. "Michael," it began. "I received your message. It has been a long time. I am overwhelmed. I will write more soon. Sarah." Overwhelmed. It wasn't a rejection, but it wasn't an immediate embrace either. It was a hesitant step back from the precipice, an acknowledgement that this revelation was as significant for her as it was for me. I waited. Another day passed. And then, a longer message arrived. Sarah wrote about her life after giving me up. She and Thomas had struggled. They had eventually had another child, a daughter, Emily, who was now grown with children of her own. She spoke of the pain, the guilt, the constant wondering about the son she had lost. She explained that she and Arthur Peterson had known each other briefly before I was born. It had been a complicated, tumultuous relationship, one that ended abruptly. She had been young, scared, and alone when she found out she was pregnant. Arthur had been married to Mary at the time, and he had been adamant that the child not disrupt his existing family. He had agreed to facilitate the adoption, ensuring it was a private one, with a family he trusted implicitly, my adoptive parents. Sarah had agreed, under the condition that Arthur promised she could have some minimal contact, a way to ensure I was okay, and perhaps, a way for her to feel a sliver of connection. Arthur had agreed, but in his own way. He had kept the truth from me, and from Mary, and had severed all direct contact with Sarah, relying on the law firm to mediate, and then, eventually, nothing. Sarah had eventually stopped hearing anything, assuming the worst. She had lived with the ghost of her lost son for decades, never knowing where I was or how I'd fared. Reading her words, I felt a profound sadness, but also a dawning understanding. My father hadn't been a cruel man, but a deeply flawed one, driven by a misguided sense of protection and a fear of scandal. Sarah, my biological mother, was not a distant, unknown figure, but a woman who had loved me and had been denied her own closure. Sarah and I began to correspond regularly. Her messages, filled with the ache of lost time and unspoken love, painted a picture of a life lived with a profound absence. She shared details about her childhood, her dreams, her regrets. She spoke of Thomas, her husband, with tenderness, explaining how he had been a good man, a stable presence, but that the shadow of her first son had always lingered between them, a silent acknowledgement of a past she could never fully erase. She also spoke of her daughter, Emily, who was unaware of my existence. The thought of bringing Emily into this complex situation weighed heavily on Sarah. I understood. My own reality had been so drastically altered, introducing another person into this web of truth felt daunting. Yet, the desire for connection, for a complete picture of my origins, was a powerful force. After weeks of emails and the occasional phone call, Sarah agreed to meet. We chose a neutral, quiet coffee shop halfway between our towns. Seeing her for the first time was surreal. She looked older, of course, her hair silvered, her face etched with lines that spoke of a life lived, but her eyes, those kind eyes from the social media photo, were the same. There was an immediate warmth, a recognition that transcended the years of separation. We talked for hours, the initial awkwardness melting away, replaced by a shared narrative of loss and longing. She cried, and I held her hand. I told her about Arthur, about his quiet nature, his struggles with expressing emotion, and how his secrecy, while painful, stemmed from a desire to shield us, in his own misguided way. I confessed my own anger and confusion, but also the growing understanding I had gained. Sarah shared her side of the story, the immense pressure she'd felt, the societal judgment, the fear of Arthur's disapproval, and the agonizing decision to relinquish me. She explained that Arthur had promised her that I would be well cared for, and that he would ensure I was aware of her existence at some point, a promise he ultimately broke. The meeting was cathartic. It wasn't a magical erasure of pain, but it was a profound step towards healing. We agreed to keep Emily informed, to let her know she had a half-brother, but to proceed with caution, allowing her to process the information at her own pace. The truth, though painful, had set us on a path toward genuine connection, a connection that acknowledged the past without being defined by its secrets. The aftermath of meeting Sarah was like emerging from a long, dense fog. The truth was out, not just for me, but for my mother, Mary, and for Sarah. Mary, though initially shocked and hurt by Arthur's decades-long deception, found a measure of peace in understanding his motivations, however flawed. She and Sarah began a tentative correspondence, a quiet acknowledgement of their shared, albeit vastly different, roles in my life. It wasn't a sudden friendship, but a respectful understanding, built on the foundation of a shared love for me. Emily, Sarah's daughter, was initially hesitant, understandably so. Discovering you have an older half-brother you never knew about is a lot to process. But Sarah, with gentle persistence, shared our story, and eventually, Emily reached out. Our first conversations were cautious, punctuated by a shared curiosity about each other's lives. She had grown up knowing about the existence of a son her mother had given up, but the details had always been vague, shrouded in her mother's grief. Now, she had a face, a name, a brother. It was a lot to absorb, but her warmth and openness were evident. We began to build a new kind of family portrait, one that included the complexities and the unexpected additions. I learned about Emily's husband, her children, her career. She learned about my life, my work, my own children, my adoptive parents' grandchildren, who now had an aunt and a whole new branch of their family tree. It was a fragile, evolving structure, built on honesty and a willingness to embrace the unforeseen. The secrecy surrounding my adoption had created a void, a sense of incompleteness. But by unearthing the truth, by confronting the past, I had not only found my biological mother and sister, but I had also, in a strange way, deepened my connection to my adoptive family. Mary and I grew closer, her understanding of Arthur's struggles allowing her to forgive him more fully, and in doing so, she seemed to forgive herself for not knowing sooner. The story of Arthur, the man who kept his secrets so tightly guarded, was finally laid bare. His legacy was no longer one of silence, but one of eventual, albeit painful, revelation. I finally understood the man who had raised me, the man who had loved me, and the immense burden he had carried. My identity was no longer defined by a secret, but by a rich tapestry of relationships, woven from unexpected threads of truth and resilience. It was an earned peace, a hard-won understanding of who I was, and who my family truly was. The journey from discovering that locked box to sitting at a table with both my mothers and my sister has been transformative. It wasn't a path I ever would have chosen, and there were moments, many moments, when the weight of the secrets felt crushing. My adoptive father, Arthur, was a man of profound contradictions. He loved me, I know that now, with a fierce, protective intensity. But his love was expressed through control, through a desire to curate my reality, to shield me from a past he deemed too painful or perhaps too scandalous. His silence was his armor, and it inadvertently created a chasm. Meeting Sarah, my biological mother, was like finding a missing piece of myself I hadn't realized was lost. Her warmth, her vulnerability, and the quiet strength with which she navigated her own grief, brought a sense of closure that I desperately needed. She didn't demand anything, she simply offered her truth, her story, and her love. And Emily, my half-sister, has become a cherished part of my life. Our relationship is still unfolding, a testament to the fact that family isn't always defined by blood, but by choice, by shared experience, and by a mutual willingness to embrace the messiness of life. My adoptive mother, Mary, has found her own peace. Understanding Arthur's lifelong burden has allowed her to see him, and their marriage, in a new light. She has been incredibly gracious, embracing Sarah and Emily into our extended family circle. It's not always easy, navigating these new dynamics. There are lingering questions, unspoken regrets, and the inevitable what-ifs. But the overwhelming emotion is one of gratitude. Gratitude for the truth, however difficult it was to uncover. Gratitude for the courage of the women in my life, Sarah and Mary, who have shown me resilience and love. Gratitude for Arthur, whose flawed efforts at protection ultimately led me to a more profound understanding of myself. This journey taught me that secrets, especially those that shape our identity, have a way of demanding to be known. And when they are finally brought into the light, the healing that can occur, the connections that can be forged, are more powerful than any illusion of protection. If you've ever felt like a piece of your own story was missing, or if you've navigated the complexities of family secrets, I encourage you to share your experiences in the comments below. And if you found this story resonant, please consider subscribing to Dark Truths. We have many more untold stories waiting to be revealed. The journey from the discovery of that locked box to the creation of this new, complex family portrait has been the most profound of my life. It wasn't a path I ever expected, and the revelations challenged everything I thought I knew. But in confronting the secrets, in allowing the truth to surface, I found not just my biological mother and sister, but a deeper understanding of myself and the families who shaped me. If you've been touched by this story, or if you have your own truths waiting to be uncovered, I invite you to share your thoughts in the comments below. And for more stories like this, that delve into the hidden corners of human experience, please subscribe to Dark Truths.